Dan started talking about this well over a year ago when he talked about how some Chinese companies bought up some land in Texas and how they were building some really, really tall wind turbines there, quote unquote wind turbines that were taller than all of the rest, and a really, really long runway. So very suspicious. So Craig, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us, what are your thoughts on the Chinese buying up this farmland in the U.S.?
Well, I think we've probably got two different issues going on. Number one, the buying the farmland around military bases, I think, is a huge concern because I doubt if they're that interested in actually farming it, and I suspect there's probably other purposes driving that. But if you look at it strictly from an agricultural standpoint, China's got a pretty huge problem. They've got about 80% of the world's population, and only about 8% of the world's arable land or farmland. And so that really doesn't work out very well for you when you've got a lot of people to feed. And so we have seen them coming in and buying farmland, not just in the U.S., but they're making a huge move in South America as well. I think in the last decade, we've seen about $66 billion worth of projects in Brazil, for example. They've bought into some grain elevators down there, as they have in the U.S. They've got a facility there in a partnership with on the Mississippi River. Of course, Smithfield Foods was acquired by a Chinese-based company. They're a large pork producer, and pork is a huge food item in China. So I think they're really doing a lot of work to try and preserve and ensure that their people have direct access to food. In fact, Costco is the main company that's been doing a lot of the buying for China. And Costco, if you look at their website, they're very upfront that their main purpose is direct access to food for the Chinese people. So I think that they probably look at food maybe a little more differently than we do, Shanna. If you don't mind, I'd like to share an experience that I had back in 1996 in the nation of Kazakhstan.
Sure, go ahead. We'd love to hear it.
It's a nation that I think is just on the north border of China in that general region, and they'd been a part of the Soviet Union. I was there shortly after the Soviet Union had broke up. Was actually teaching for a month in their agricultural college in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And I happened to be there when the May Day celebration took place, which your listeners probably know that was a huge celebration in Soviet Union days as they gained victory over the Nazis in World War II. And I was with my interpreter, and as we're watching this, she said, it was sure stupid to fight that war. And I said, well, Hitler was a pretty bad guy, And she said, but not as bad as Stalin. And she shared her family experience that her grandmother and grandfather had 21 kids. When the war broke out, Grandpa was sent to the Russian front where he was killed. Grandma and the 21 kids were sent off to a collective farm to raise food for the war effort. And of those 21 kids, 18 of them starved to death during that time.
Oh, wow.
She said if you even grabbed a handful of wheat, the soldiers would shoot you. So their view of food and having experienced famine and starvation in their lifetime gave them a very different view of food and the importance of food than what we in the U.S. typically see or think of. And I think that's what's going on in China to a large extent as well. There are people that in their lifetime remember famine and starvation in that country. And so I think the Chinese government probably takes food security a little more seriously than our own government does. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the drive behind what we're seeing as they kind of reach their tentacles out across the world and ensure that they've got food supplies. We are seeing some things going on right now in China. They, in fact, on September 18th, they released another 15,000 metric tons of pork from their state reserves. Pork prices in China year over year up 22.5% right now. And so you've got a large population that eats a lot of pork, and prices are kind of screaming out of control. I think there's some real fear of unrest in that country right now as well. if they don't get this whole food thing under control.